All right, so welcome to the session, everyone. We're just waiting for a few more people to join, and then we'll get started with the session. Okay, I think now enough people have joined. So welcome everyone to the session, to this webinar. We're going to talk a lot about next gen finance. We're going to talk a lot about LLM use cases in finance. So yeah, it's an action-packed session today. For all of your questions, yes, will we have access to the recording after meeting? Yes, we will be recording the meeting, and I will send out the recording to all of you after the session is done. So it might take a couple of hours for me to do that, but yeah, you'll get that recording. So before we start, maybe just a little bit more on a little bit of house rules over here. So we're not going to be using the chat as much, and if we can go to the next slide. Just 3 points that we need to talk about. Please use the Q&A section for asking questions. It makes it much easier for us to keep track of all the questions that we have answered, and also makes it easier for me to ask the questions to the presenters. The session is being recorded, as I mentioned before. And at the end of the webinar, we'll just have like a very short survey. We really use the feedback that you guys give us. So please do take a few moments and fill that out. Yeah, so now coming to who's presenting today. So today for this particular session, as you can see in this next slide, we have Eliza. So Eliza is a product manager at deepset. She spent more than 5 years as an asset manager earlier at Aberdeen, and she brings with her a lot of insights about the financial industry and also about the use cases that we've been seeing in the market for this kind of for this industry vertical. So Eliza, if you're on the call, could you come in and continue the presentation, maybe a little bit more about yourself? Hi.
Thank you, Parry. And yes, thanks everyone for joining this webinar. So yeah, as Parry mentioned, I'm Eliza, a product manager at deepset, but I spent like over 5 years working at Aberdeen as investing in real estate credit. But yeah, I'm really excited to welcome you all. Today, we're going to talk about GenAI use cases in financial services to work smarter now. I'll start off by setting the scene a little bit, walking through the enterprise GenAI landscape, then moving on to some of the patterns and use cases we've seen in financial services. And then we'll also get a chance to actually see what building a GenAI app could look like live. And we do have a special guest here today. We also have Mattis, our VP of product. So he's going to join us for the Q&A part. So definitely leave all your questions for that section later. And to start it off, like I'm super excited to see you all here. And I was wondering if 5 years ago we hosted this webinar, what the attendance would be like. The fact that you're all here today is somewhat testament to the fact that interest in GenAI has entered the mainstream. Recently, we saw McKinsey releasing a statistic saying that I think around 65% of respondents said that they were actually actively using GenAI at work. And we're also seeing all sorts of headlines from companies talking about different AI solutions they're really interested in building or solutions that they've actually even released. But on the flip side, we're also seeing that only 10% of organizations have actually launched a generative AI solution. So there is a bit of contrasting message going on. And you might be wondering, well, what's going on here? Now, any one of you who's actually used some sort of a, consumer GenAI solution, whether it's, I don't know, ChatGPT or Perplexity or even, Google, Gemini, or Bing, we can't deny the absolutely incredible advancement in technology that we're seeing today. But with all that value that generative AI can bring, some of the business leaders are probably feeling a lot of pressure to adopt GenAI, to not lag behind, to stay relevant. And what we're seeing is that a lot of companies are kind of walking around with a metaphorical hammer, seeing everything as a nail. So seeing every opportunity or every problem that they're witnessing as an opportunity to use AI. And not to say that AI isn't incredible or can't be transformative for the problems you might be facing, but it's not always the right solution. And it may not even be what your users or your internal employees are even looking for. So, we really think that it's super, super important to actually start first with a problem and actually figure out whether, GenAI it would be right for solving that problem. So starting with the use case, which in this context is essentially just an articulation of how generative AI solves a real problem and delivers measurable value is really important. And some of you in the audience today, maybe you've already kind of started playing around with GenAI. Maybe you already have some use cases in mind, while some of you may be struggling to find a use case, and we do see that as well with some of our customers. So we're actually going to be offering a workshop to everyone in this webinar. We have a few slots available in an ongoing workshop, and the workshop is going to essentially help you define a use case and bring it all the way to show you all the way what building a prototype with that use case could look like. I'll share more details about that a bit later, so definitely stay tuned and you'll hear more details. Now, I've talked a little bit about the importance of starting with a use case, starting with a problem, and I also wanted to share some of the use cases we're seeing in financial services. I appreciate that maybe not all of you here today are working in financial services. Maybe some of you have colleagues in financial services. Maybe you have a finance department at work. Maybe you work in some adjacent industries. But I still hope that the use cases that I'll be sharing will still act as some sort of a representation of other business processes or other workflows that you've engaged in and still be really valuable and helpful for you. So, one of the things that we're seeing, especially from companies and financial services, is wanting to automate the process of repeatedly extracting the same information from different data sources. And what I mean by this is I'll kind of give you a real life scenario just to make this a bit easier to understand. Now, imagine an analyst in, let's say, a real estate or venture capital or private equity. All of these industries have some common ground in how their businesses operate because they're essentially sourcing private assets so that their investors can make a return. So you might be, sourcing these private assets, competing with others, and you, as an analyst, you spend a lot of time analyzing so much information about a potential investment. And you'll be looking to your investment criteria, philosophy, thesis to really guide you for, what information you should be reading, what information you should be extracting. And you might be preparing some sort of an artifact. Maybe it's an investment memo. Maybe if there's a lawyer in your team, they might prepare a legal assessment. That artifact is going to drive an important business decision. Essentially, should we invest in this company or not? Do we think this investment is worthy? And you might be noticing some building blocks here already of this pattern where essentially the information that you want to find out or your due diligence criteria is more or less standardized and you're just applying it to various projects. Maybe it's various legal contracts where you want to do a legal assessment on. Maybe it's investments. Maybe you're interested in building some sort of a competitive intelligence system where you kind of have a few of these questions or information that you want to extract and you're applying it over and over again over various different units of information. And in this case, I'd really like to actually ask you to maybe reflect, maybe think about whether you can identify this type of pattern in some of your own day-to-day workflows or maybe even workflows of your colleagues. And we've spoken a bit about use cases now, and you might be wondering, well, where does generative AI fit into this? Like, why would generative AI be relevant for this type of a pattern? So what's really unique and remarkable about generative AI compared to like machine learning or other like AI techniques is in its ability to create net new information based on data it's being trained on. And in the case of a model like ChatGPT, well, the data that it's seen and it's being trained on is actually the entire internet up until 2021, which is, quite a lot of information. And with that comes a lot of really incredible capabilities, from reasoning, from synthesis, content generation, being able to extract information, question answering, building upon things, fill in the blanks. And it's pretty remarkable for its creativity, but with some of that creativity, there does come a bit of a trade-off. And you might have heard recently, in the US, I think there was a team of lawyers that were using ChatGPT for legal research, and they submitted some, unknowingly to them, submitted some fake cases to support their claim. And this is definitely a scenario that no enterprise would want to find themselves in, especially where in industries like financial services or legal, where trust, reputation is really, really important. And this is one of the reasons why we're seeing companies increasingly adopting a technique called retrieval augmented generation. So imagine if you can take the LLM's capabilities like extracting information, summarizing, but being able to define the data source and being able to prompt it so that, or instruct it so that it really can only generate an answer based on the information that you've supplied it with. And so this is where you might be already kind of fitting in the puzzles a bit, where the previous use case we discussed really fits neatly with retrieval augmented generation and its ability to define the data source and then generate an answer or extract the relevant information and summarize an answer based on it's been supplied, and being able to do that over large volumes of data. And you might be wondering, well, okay, how would I go about building something like this? Or who would even go about building something like this? In terms of the who, we find that teams of any size can be successful. The key is actually balancing technical and domain expertise together. And really, the domain expertise is not to be underestimated, as you really want someone in your team that actually understands the problem, understands the data, and can really collaborate with the technical experts. And in terms of the how, this is where DeepSet Cloud can fit in. DeepSet Cloud is a space where teams can come together to build, test, and ship LLM applications with speed and trust, with support and from experts and tools to really across the entire LLM app development lifecycle. And in a second, you're actually going to see how. So in a second, we're going to take this use case that we kind of talked about and walk through all the different elements of it. So we talked about, having your data, but being able to connect it to an AI system composing of maybe a large language model like ChatGPT or any model of your choice, and this technique, retrieval augmented generation, so that you can build out a prototype, so that you can test it and really quickly understand the quality of the information that you're getting. You can also loop in those domain experts or subject matter experts into that testing part, so that really that the AI teams and the project teams really have confidence in what they are building and confidence in the answers that are being generated, and being able to iterate over this cycle over and over again. So in this moment, I'm going to pause, and I think what we're going to start doing is actually showing what building some of this could look like. And I just want to maybe take a bit of a refresh. So if we think about the scenario we discussed earlier, so imagine, you're, let's say, a private equity analyst, and you have a lot of information that you need to analyze about a potential investment. So let's say the investment might be in a company like Instacart, which is a US public company in grocery delivery. So, you might be analyzing lots of different data about Instacart. So this is an example of an S1 filing. It's, quite a long piece of information. I think it has 400 pages here. You might also be looking at earning reports, which also contains a lot of data. And you might want to build a system that extracts all the information that you need, and it might look something like this. So imagine all the information that you want to your liking, structured with also clear references, so you can actually understand where this information is coming from. You wouldn't want to, just be nervous that this is another one of ChatGPT's creative streaks, say. And so here you can really actually assess where this information is coming from which file. And if you want to think about like, okay, so what is DeepSet Cloud? Where does it fit in? Think of DeepSet Cloud as essentially the back office to this memo, or the backend service that is essentially creating a system that can power and create structured information in this format. And so with DeepSet Cloud, you can connect your data to the AI system that we discussed. So we offer a bunch of off-the-shelf templates for different use cases, whether it's like RAG or chat, and also across any type of foundation model that you would like to play around with, whether it's open source or closed source, ChatGPT or something else. And so, yeah, maybe let's look at what actually, if we take some of those files as examples, like around Instacart, let's look at what bringing your data and connecting to the AI system could actually look like. So with DeepSet Cloud, you would just essentially select a template of your choice, and then hit submit, and then within a few minutes, you'd be able to actually test this out. So let's think of what we could maybe ask. I just want to show you maybe an example of information that might be very deep here. Let's see. Okay, so they mentions here that Instacart welcomes several retailers to Instacart Marketplace. They gave some examples of grocers. Okay, so maybe we can work with this. So here I'll be selecting essentially that RAG system with a GPT-4o model. So one of the latest models that is powering ChatGPT. So I might want to ask a question around, Instacart, and like what is, like what were the retailers that Instacart welcomed? So what were the retailers? Okay, and so here you see an answer being generated. And what's more is actually you can see that there's this reference, and you can actually clearly see where this came from. So it's saying that it came from this file, and it's actually highlighting the paragraph and the passage that is helping generate these answers. So if you think about like we talked about the RAG system is, you're connecting your data, it's extracting the relevant information from that data, and it's generating answer only from that, not from something that it saw within its training data set. And it does this sentence by sentence. Now, if we remember our use case, we were talking about scale, we were talking about efficiency, we were talking about being able to define this in one go. So you wouldn't want to, type this out each time, and you wouldn't want to do this over 2 files. You might want to do this over a vast number of files. And if you have a use case like that, we have a solution for this as well. So we have kind of built out a workflow whereby essentially what you can do is you can, actually, let me go back. What you can do is you can select select the due diligence criteria that you want to define. So in this case, let's say I have a bunch of questions that really match some of the information that I have in my investment memo. So I can add that in. I can add that in, and then I can also select the exact AI architecture that really matches my use case. So we talked about maybe using retrieval augmented generation and having the flexibility to pick any LLM model of your choice. And once you kind of select those components and you hit go, you will essentially get all the information that you want, all structured in one place within a few minutes. So I'm going to pause here a little bit, as I know this is a lot of information. And this is just one example. And I'd really love to hear and maybe see whether, this is already giving you some ideas, or whether it's like resonating, and whether you can think of other types of use cases where, you're kind of predefining some sort of due diligence criteria or some side of information that you want to know, and applying it to different kinds of collections of data over and over again. And maybe I can show you another example So imagine same private equity analyst or maybe another kind of investment analyst. Maybe now it's earning call season, and I want to know a lot of different information about different kind of companies that are in my portfolios. So maybe I want to create a system that transcribes all the earning calls and generates summaries in bulk in one go. So here I have a couple of earning call transcript from the latest season, and with the same workflow, I would be able to select the right AI architecture matching my use case, and be able to generate summaries for each of these transcripts. So for example, here I have Tesla, I have Palantir, and same thing with trust layer kind of built in, so I can clearly see where some of this information is coming from. Now, I might want to actually also search over some of this type of information. And if that's the case, I can do that too. So imagine I want to, if we go back to the example of Instacart, maybe I want to compare, Instacart to one of their competitors. So let me think. Okay, I might ask a question like, okay, how did Instacart compare with DoorDash this earning call season? So, okay, it talks about like Instagram had a strong quarter, then kind of mentions DoorDash here and creates some sort of a high level TLDR summary line at the end. So I think maybe you're kind of seeing a few patterns here around, taking your data, connecting it to an AI system, being able to really quickly build out a prototype, testing it, figuring out whether this is exactly what you were looking for or not. And this is just one part of that journey that we talked about. So if we look at the slide here, this is just kind of one part of that early journey. But one of the values of DeepSet Cloud is in being able to do this end to end. And building out a prototype like that is simple, and that's great. But actually, taking that prototype and turning it into a live system would require some other steps. For example, you might want to try out different models. You might want to experiment with different configurations. And this is where DeepSet Cloud can really help by offering you a suite of tools really tailored to all steps in your journey, and also a team of experts that can help teams of any size realize value with AI. Some of you might be quite early on in this journey, so you might be before this part. Maybe you're at the part where you kind of want to figure out a use case or even see if GenAI could be relevant. And if that's the case, like I mentioned in the start, we are actually going to be opening up a few slots for an AI bootcamp. And essentially, what you're going to get out of this bootcamp is being able to walk away with a validated use case, a solid understanding of LLM architecture best practices, and a clear blueprint for going live. And this workshop will be led by myself, but also by Mattis, our VP of product, who's just joined. And Mattis has been working in this space since 2018 and has a lot of extensive experience building super, super impactful applications. He's worked with customers like BaFin, the German financial authority, the German SSE. He's worked with Zeit, Siemens, and so many other customers. Those are just to name a few. So if this message is resonating with you, you're early on in the journey, you want to figure out what starting with a use case and to a prototype could look like, definitely take a look at the details and sign up. And if you're already kind of further down your journey and you kind of already have some use cases, but maybe you're stuck, maybe you're trying to improve your performance or evaluate them, then come and have a chat with us, as we can help out there as well. And if you're in the lucky 10% that's actually released something live, then congratulations first of all. But we can help out there as well. Come and chat to us with maybe expanding that use case or really optimizing your user engagement and improving the quality of your application. So with that, I'm going to conclude my talk here. I'm going to open up for some Q&A with myself and Mattis.
Thanks, Eliza. Just wanted to say I'm super excited for the workshop as well. We've had a few organizations go through it. It's super insightful. Like it's a packed workshop, but you will walk away with a lot of insights and the blueprint for your use case. So excited for that. Thanks for the presentation, definitely, and looking forward to the questions here.
Yeah, and we seem to have quite a bit of them actually. So I'm looking forward to this part. Maybe we can stop sharing the screen so that everyone can see like the three people. Cool. So maybe I'll start right up at the top. So I think there's a couple of questions around hallucination first, right? So we have the first one from Steven that came in like towards like really the beginning of the session. So it was more like with LLMs, there is a percentage of hallucinations. Now, this fact was also recently stated as a concern in finance by the Federal Reserve. Now, what have you experienced it as a percentage, and how would you decrease this risk? And then just to follow up on that one, like Rishikesh also had a similar question, which is he says, how can a finance person trust LLM on breakdown of EBITDA kind of questions till we are sure that the LLM is not hallucinating? So something on those lines.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can definitely, empathize with that concern. Like the example I gave with those legal lawyers, like doing research on ChatGPT, no one wants to be submitting those like fake information. Same thing. You don't want to rely on an EBITDA that LM said if it's completely fake, right? So completely appreciate the concern there. And I think there's like two parts to how you could go about bringing that layer of trust with basically AI-based applications. So yeah, one is in being able to understand the groundedness. So groundedness is essentially to what extent is the answer that's being generated being generated by the source documents that you've provided. Because there's one difference between going to ChatGPT and asking it about, oh, what was Instacart's EBITDA, and another where you actually are defining the source and being able to see exactly how that information is being passed and being generated. So it's like if you recall in the demo, you can actually see references to really clearly pinpoint where the answer is coming from. And before obviously the step of someone being able to see references and having that trust comes a lot of work in being able to evaluate these applications and running a lot of experiments to really make sure that the groundedness score or the degree of groundedness is something acceptable. So within DeepSet Cloud, we actually have lots of tools to help you optimize your performance and actually have this groundedness scores, which you can think of as what is, it's like the anti-hallucination score, or the other side of the coin, to really understand whether it's at a level that you feel confident with. Having said that, I would say that models are getting better and better. I'm not saying that they cannot hallucinate at all, but I think there's been like improved quality. And I think by using techniques like retrieval augmented generation, where you can define the source and then actually visualize where the information is coming from, you can definitely improve some of that trust with the LM apps. I would say as well, though, that we do probably see that with financial services, maybe some of the use cases are more internal versus external because of this fear, but actually testing out, really understanding the quality, constantly iterating over it, and playing around with it can kind of give you an understanding of whether it's something that you'd want to release something external or something that you'd want to use more internally.
Cool. Then we have another question from Amrit Patnaik, which is very focused on like the product itself. So it says, does DeepSeek Cloud provision multi-hop document comparison and summarization?
Yeah, well, that's a very specific question. I would say that, yeah, so DeepSet Cloud, we are powered by our open source framework, Haystack. And the beauty of that is that you can kind of build different types of compound systems to your liking. So we offer you these off-the-shelf templates that give you a head start. But if you want to build something more custom, you have the flexibility of using different components to really do that and build whatever kind of system that you are interested in. So I think if I wanted to answer your specific question, maybe you can reach out to me LinkedIn so I can figure out exactly what you're trying to do. But we have that option between full kind of custom options with using our Haystack framework and off-the-shelf templates that you saw in the demo.
And maybe to add here, in terms of multi-hop, we're seeing all ranges. Like we see customers who really want to specific or focus on one specific piece of information in one document, but we have many cases where the information is spread across different documents or chunks, as you might know them as well. And it can really get information from all of these, not just from a single one. And I think like Eliza also demoed kind of how it would look like for summarization. If you're interested, we can get into more depth on how that looks like for multi-hop as well.
Nice. We have an anonymous attendee asking a question here, which is also interesting. Like, how is this different from OpenAI developer platform using the retrieval assistant?
So yeah, we find that a lot of people start their journey with OpenAI. Maybe you just start with ChatGPT. Maybe you start going into custom GPTs and using some of their other tools. But usually people end up coming to us again because I think it's a matter of degree of like customizability, degree of scale, degree of the amount of data that you may have at hand. So I think that people tend to kind of experiment with OpenAI and play around with it, maybe build some sort of a pilot. But when they actually want to build something in production, when they actually want to, really create a system that's being used by lots of different people, I think that's when they're looking for other kinds of solutions. You can still leverage OpenAI's models with DeepSet Cloud, but you can build a solution more tailored to your needs and obviously taking scalability into account.
And also, like, I think if you look at architectures, what we see most of our customers using in practice is a hybrid retrieval approach, for example, where you use BM25, you use an embedding model, and you use a ranker after that. And that's just the retrieval part. You might want to consider metadata. All of these are practical examples of this is a little more custom than what you would get maybe at OpenAI with just the retrieval assistant.
And then being able to actually like experiment over those configurations, like which combinations of retrievers would you be interested in, being able to evaluate them. We also kind of provide tools to help you with that as well.
Nice. There's a very interesting question I see here from Emma actually. So the question is like, is it possible to ask for investment analyst level question? Is it possible to ask an investment analyst level question like calculate CAGR over 3 years, or what's the cumulative interest rate to be paid in year 3 after taking a loan, stuff like that? So is it possible?
Yeah, so I think actually GPT is not known for performing mathematical calculations yet. I'm going to add the word yet. So the demo kind of that what I was showing was, basically looking at information in text and then generating an answer, summarizing that information versus like performing a calculations. I mean, you can ask GPT, I think, to perform some calculations today. But I think, yeah, if you want someone to kind of create a whole like financial model, I don't think we're there just yet, but let's see where we get to with that.
And I would maybe add here, like, really see it for the tool that it is. You have a lot of unstructured data. It's really, really good at understanding unstructured data. Use it for that. There are ways to also do calculations. If you think about, don't ask GPT directly, have it use Python or SQL or something like that. Instead, you could have results like that with this approach. But at the same time, if you think about it, your data is already structured. Calculating this is only a formula, so you probably already have that set up. Why use this really large language model for the task? So leverage it where it makes most sense, I would say.
Yeah, and if we look at that graphic that I shared with like the user needs a cycle, but maybe you're interested in building a spaceship, as in like AI can be just one part or one small component of your entire solution. So like kind of like Mata said, like maybe you're using it to extract some information, but then you can use like other tools or combine it with other things out there that are maybe better suited for numerical information. So you don't need it to solve the full problem end to end. If there's already value in solving a small part of the problem, then that's already a good first step.
Mm-hmm. So on a different note, we have another question here that says like, how does our tech standardize financial information across different industries, such as multiples or sector-specific metrics like utilization rates? How is the relevant data extracted? And what are the success rates as the tech may pick up something else in the screening criteria? So like you're looking for one thing, but in the context of like multiple companies, the same thing might be different things. Have you ever come across such a situation actually?
Could you say that again? I didn't quite understand, because I think I heard like standardization of tech metrics.
Yeah, so it's like, how does your tech standardize financial information across different industries, such as multiples or sector-specific metrics, such as utilization rates? How is the relevant data extracted, and what are the success rates as the tech may pick up something else in the screening criteria?
Okay, so I guess it's like if the same information, the information that you need is being expressed in different formats and depending on the source of data that you're looking at. So am I understanding that correctly?
Probably, maybe.
I think the way I understand it is like in different sectors, you have different metrics that are interesting, different things to look at. And I think the way I would answer that is DeepSet Cloud isn't the end application. You can build and configure your own custom GenAI workflows with that. So if you're working in construction, for example, or you're investing in construction, let's say, you can pick metrics in your questions and the information you want to extract that is more specific to the construction sector, versus if you're looking at companies in retail primarily, then you might have a different set of metrics, and that's basically what you then upload as your extraction criteria. So you can really build and fine-tune the application you want to have, and you're not reliant on this is a vertical point solution which might not meet your needs, basically.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we have a little bit more of a technical question here. So it's anonymous, unfortunately. So how effective is it to build a RAG app on a structured database? Let's say an ATS database with data related to candidates and jobs. And also, how can we control what kind of data is being shared with the LLMs, such as OpenAI?
I will take this one, since we actually have done quite a bit in this area, and there's some exciting news where I think you're going to be the first ones to hear them, actually. So structured data, let's say a relational database, that's a huge challenge, definitely. But at the same time, it provides so much value, because imagine, instead of like being reliant on, this is something that is in the text of a single document or multiple documents, you can aggregate across all of your structured data. And you give that capability not just to a business analyst or someone who knows SQL and can query the database. You give that capability to everyone, because you can ask the question in natural language. And you can do that in DeepSet Cloud. We are actually launching a Snowflake integration in the coming days, where you can connect to your database in your Snowflake data warehouse. You can ask the natural language question, and the LLM is going to generate the SQL. You're going to get back the results, and you can really integrate that with your RAG workflows and the unstructured data. So that's super interesting. If you want to know more, please hit us up. We have a contact us form on the website, and we can share more on the Snowflake integration. but it's also going to come up. So if you're watching our channels on LinkedIn and the website, you're probably going to see something in the coming weeks.
On a similar note, Sashi is asking, is DeepSet Cloud available on the AWS Marketplace or the Azure Marketplace? Can we evaluate it to build a POC?
It is available on the AWS Marketplace. It's not available on the Azure Marketplace, but yeah, if you're interested in evaluating it, yeah, I think maybe the best step would be actually to first like reach out to us, and we can kind of understand what you're trying to do and give you a demo and give you access to it.
Mm-hmm. All right. So I think Rishikesh had another follow-up question from before. So he's saying, how are the LLMs or RAGs coping with different gaps? So accounting principles, I think so. So currency separators and other practical problems like these, which need some amount of reasoning and not just like data synthesis.
They're actually quite good at that. Like from what I'm seeing, I can share this because it recently came up in a use case that wasn't in finance. It's more life sciences, but basically there's different units. The extraction needs to be very precise. There's very complex tables in PDF files, multi-column, multi-header tables, and the large language model is actually exceptionally good at extracting the information precisely with the right units, with the right with the right numbers and everything. So it's actually gotten really, really good. But then of course it depends on where you want to use it. If you want to use it in a business critical workflow, I would still check some of these things. Like it's an accelerator right now. Your people can work much faster because of it. I wouldn't do automatic trading based on something that came out of an LLM. Like it's not at that level, but it's at the level where your people are going to be 10 to 50% more effective because they use GenAI.
Mm-hmm. So I think now we have like another, like a more structured question, like organizational questions, like what teams and stakeholders in the organization should be involved in this entire production process that you were speaking about, Eliza.
Yeah, so I think I mentioned in the talk a little bit like that we definitely recommend a team that's really balanced across both domain expertise and technical expertise. So what could that look like? Technical expertise could look like maybe you have a data scientist in your company. Maybe you even have like just a software engineer, but that's working on actually building consumer-facing products. Maybe you have someone that's actually an expert in AI engineering, or someone that's just willing to learn the ropes. And in terms of the domain expertise, we find that just someone that is really an expert in, let's say, the data, and an expert in how the type of questions that people might be asking when they're interacting with this application. And the reason why this is important is because you want someone to be able to actually like verify. Like you wouldn't just build out a prototype like I did in the demo and just send it out live. You actually want someone to have a look at some of these answers, figure out, okay, what are some patterns? Where are some questions that are the app is answering really well? What are some that aren't? Are there sometimes some issues with some of the retrieval? Like, are the right files being retrieved? So you want someone that has that expertise in that data and the problem side of things. And we also find that it's actually also just really important for there to be a person or people that can really lead the project or the product and have some sort of a vision and idea of how they would like the users to interact with it, how would they like to release it, how would they like to do beta testing on. So we think that these three kind of personas, so someone with some technical expertise, someone that really understands the problem space and the data, and someone that can really kind of operationalize this, we feel like those three kind of personas in a team would really add a lot of value in making you successful in your GenAI adoption.
Makes a lot of sense. Could you also share, like, on this note, based off of another question, like, what are the things that we have learned working with some of our customers? Like, where does this process break, or where things are a little bit more harder than we expected during this entire production journey?
Yeah, so I think not to sound like a parrot, not to repeat myself too much. I think everyone likes to really focus on the technical side, and I'm not saying that that's not important. I'm not saying that's obviously really, really important, but I think sometimes people forget some of these like basic principles. Like we've seen examples of maybe the technical team kind of completely siloed, working very separately. And then when they're like, okay, here we have our app or our pipeline, we're happy with it, and maybe someone else is testing it and they're like, well, it can't do this, it can't do this, or did you even add the right documents here? So we actually find that sometimes people don't appreciate the importance of these two different disciplines working together, sitting next to each other, not being siloed. I think that is definitely one thing. The other thing we also find is, of course, we do find that people do get nervous around the quality, and they kind of ask or test on all sorts of questions. But it's actually really important to think about, what are your users going to ask? Like, what are your users trying to get out of the system, and not kind of think about all the realm of possible kind of scenarios. So again, like really sticking close to the problem and actually having an idea of how people are going to interact with what you're building. Sounds easy, but in principle or in practice, sometimes we do see people struggling with this as well.
We have a final, like, a little bit more technical question here again. So there's somebody who's anonymous again, has multi-column data in an Excel sheet or a CSV, and they want to build a RAG app. How would that work?
So there would be, I think, multiple approaches. The first one is your data in the CSV or Excel in a format that you could actually load it into a database? That's the case, you could use the text to SQL approach that I mentioned before. That's actually a pretty clean way of handling complex Excel sheets or complex tabular data, let's say. Other approaches could be that you have a kind of conversion step at indexing time, where you try to convert using an LLM, of course, or a smaller language model, where you convert kind of the rows or columns, depending on the structure of the sheet, to textual statements. Something like, the revenue of Snowflake was XYZ in the last quarter, assuming you have a column revenue, company, amount, and quarter. That could be an approach. Another approach would be to use a visual question answering pipeline, where you kind of screenshot the table and feed that into a visual model. That's actually quite promising, and we see quite some success with that. So really a lot of different choices that you have on the platform, and you need to find the one that matches your use case, which means you need to test it out, you need to give it to the domain expert, they need to provide feedback, and then you can pick the one that works best.
Sounds good. And what about in general about model usage? So someone's asking, can I use any model that I want? And what happens if I need to change it?
So yeah, DeepSet Cloud gives you access to any models that you want to use, like open source, closed source, all the best-in-class LLM models. We are vendor agnostic. And in terms of switching out models, I think the practice of doing that is relatively simple, because we have these, abstraction layer with our pipeline templates where you can kind of change it, and it's a very simple step. But in terms of actually evaluating whether, another model gives you the same degree of answer quality or style of answers that you want, and being able to evaluate all the parts of your pipeline from retrieval to the answer, I think that would be a considerable task, but we have tools for that as well. We have ability to run experiments, ability to visualize the same kind of like app or pipeline with two different models, being able to do qualitative testing on it, but quantitative as well. So that's kind of how we would encourage you to go about it, definitely with some testing involved, especially if it's an actual pipeline that's already being used in production and users are happy with it. Being able to actually go through an evaluation process with some key evaluation principles would be recommended.
Makes sense. There's a question in I was just looking through the Q&A section. I think Andre mentioned something in the chat already about this. But I think it's worth taking it again. It says in the real world LLM, in real world LLM apps only. What am I saying? Sorry. In the real world, RAG is usually not enough. You'll need more complicated agent-based workflows to do dispatching, collecting additional information, etc. Does deepset support this kind of app building?
Yes, so the opportunities are wide with DeepSet Cloud. It goes well beyond naive RAG, and I agree definitely. You will usually need more than just an embedding model and the LLM. You want to have different pre-processing steps. You want to have maybe different retrieval techniques, as I mentioned before. You want to use metadata in your pipeline. Maybe you even want to use two LLMs in your pipeline, maybe the same, maybe different ones. All of that is configurable. We've seen that our customers build robust applications quickly. That's important to us. And you can build complex workflows. Like one example is we had a customer recently. They wanted to basically have one, let's call it agent, generate marketing copy based on some data, based on a knowledge base, basically. So that agent needed to retrieve the right knowledge and then generate the marketing copy. And then they wanted to have a second LLM, let's call it agent, to check the output of the first one to decide, is that actually legally compliant? Was a sensitive area where marketing is pretty regulated. So the second one would have access to a set of legal regulations and would then check the first one against these regulations and then put out like, okay, this is actually compliant versus no, this is not compliant. And then, of course, big disclaimer, don't let that loose and just let it bombard people with marketing messages without human oversight, especially in a regulated industry. But it really can help you a lot in your workflow and speed it up if the basics are already covered and you just need to check it afterwards. So yeah, come back to the question, you can build very complex systems in DeepSet Cloud. And what's more important, you actually have the tooling to monitor, test, and evaluate these complex applications.
All right. Maybe we can take one last question for this session because we were almost at time. So someone's asking again, I think Sashi's asking again, how mature is the DeepSet Haystack with respect to building multi-agent systems? So the goal here is to build autonomous bots that can perform a bunch of tasks and produce some desired output by stitching together using crews of agents and multiple tasks and tools. So how do you feel about that?
So I would say I like agent crews. I like to look at like multi-agent workflows, discussing a big task, breaking it down. It looks really, really impressive at the demo stage. Like I can't deny that. I think when it gets to industry application, we're still at a level of this is an early idea to toy around with. If you want to have a robust production-ready application within the quarter, probably don't focus on that. The problem is that these long-running complex tasks have so many degrees of freedom that the possibilities for breakage are just expanding and expanding and expanding. Like you have one agent that can produce a bunch of different outputs and fail in different ways. And then you add another one that can fail in different ways and another one that can fail in different ways. So you're increasing the surface for bugs, essentially. If you're a developer, it's similar to your code base. The larger your code base, the more bugs you can have. And the same applies to agents. So I think it's really cool tech. You can play around with that, especially in Haystack. It supports looping, branching within pipelines, so you can build complex multi-agent workflows. But I think it's not production ready in most cases that I know of. Maybe you know different ones where you've seen it really work for a practical use case, but most things I've seen, it's a little too far from being production ready.
Fantastic. All right, so I think that's all the time we have for questions today. We're almost at time. So thank you very much, Eliza, for the presentation, and for Mattis for joining the Q&A section. And also thanks a lot to Andre in the background answering a bunch of questions that we would not be able to take, live, considering the time. So just a reminder for everyone, there's a link in the chat for the bootcamp that we mentioned during the session. I will share this again in the chat. Please have a look, see if it makes sense for your team. We have very limited slots for this, so please fill out that form and let us know so that you can have those sessions with us. Cool. And thanks everyone for coming in, and yeah, we'll see you for our next webinar very soon. Take care, guys. Bye.
Thanks, bye.